This is the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. Welcome back. My name is Clint Knight.
And I'm Jacob Hort.
And we are presented by SprintCarUnlimited.com. And we're glad you're back here now that we are 2.5 weeks into Florida craziness. NASCAR's back on the track. And there's been a lot of stuff, a lot of racing going on. And, man, it's been something almost every night, Jacob.
Oh, I know. If you're at like New Smyrna Beach, I don't know exactly where that is in Florida. I think it's pretty close to Daytona, but I mean, they've been racing every night there for the last, probably 5 or 6 nights. Cody Swanson's been doing some asphalt late model stuff, and he's getting closer to some wins. I think he finished second in like pro late model last night, and he's been running the super late models. So good to see Cody Swanson doing that stuff. And we were talking before we recorded, we had Daytona with the NASCAR Cup Series. They had their Busch Clash a couple nights ago, and we have Outlaws at Volusia, All-Stars at Volusia and East Bay, and USAC at Bubba with the midgets last weekend, and the sprint cars on right now as we record. We have the East Bay Kingdom of the 360s, and by golly, there's even late models and big block modifieds, and who knows what else is racing in Florida right now. They win a Super Bowl and they get all the racing, apparently.
They'll be heading north soon enough. I feel like we're turning the corner here on winter, and spring will be spring is headed our way, and the sprint cars will be headed our way too. So as well as the late models and the trucks and everything else that comes with spinning circles on dirt. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. This is our second video episode. Our first one was out a couple of weeks ago. Check that out if you're able on our YouTube channel, where we had the video interview with the USAC Speed 2 Midget Series, and this one is a full episode of the introduction and the interview, and we're starting to figure this video thing out, I think. And I'm not promising that every episode is going to have a video, but we're learning a little bit. I'm even learning how to hide my background and try to not run around the house, figure out where I can put a video camera that doesn't look.
You're fancier than me. I can't figure out the backgrounds, so I just pick a spot that isn't in shambles because, middle of a house remodel right now, and here we are. I still got sprint cars in the background, so that's all that counts.
You do. Cool. Well, how do we set this one up, man? This is a huge episode for us. We reached out to a couple of broadcasters, a couple of legendary broadcasters, a couple of Sprint Car Hall of Famers, both of them in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame, who've worked together, been in the industry as a driver, a writer, a broadcaster for a long time. And they've written a book together, and we asked them if they would come on the show and talk with us. So we're very excited to give you this interview that we had the opportunity to record today with Dave Argabright and Brad Doty. Man, I still, just to think about it, you're gonna see here when we dive into the video that I was a little nervous, man. I was excited, nervous. So I'm not sure what else to say about it. I mean, these two guys have their history kind of speaks for themselves. Do you have anything else to say before we dive in?
I mean, it's probably good we had like a time limit on this thing because, I mean, it's a good and bad thing, I guess. But I mean, I feel like if we would have asked everything we wanted to and, really let them dive deep into the story times, like we'd probably still be recording 7 hours later
Yeah.
from when we recorded this earlier today. So it was an excellent interview. I enjoyed it. I can't say I was as nervous as you just because I have a little more experience interviewing some guys, but yeah, it was, man, what a cool experience.
Yeah. Two of the greats, and you'll hear me mention this at some point in the interview, but I grew up listening to these guys as broadcasters,
Hmm.
and so this was huge, and they've done a lot uh, for everything on dirt, open wheel, late model,
Hmm.
open wheel, fenders, wings, no wings, all of it. These two guys have had a hand in something, if it was writing, broadcasting, or driving. So uh, they've I mentioned they have a book that they've written together called Still Wide Open, about Brad Doty. You'll hear us mention that and talk about that in the interview. If some of you may have been looking for that book over the years, it was out of print and very difficult to find, but it's been reissued, and you can get your hands on it. So, um, without anything else to say, I guess here's the interview with our interview with Dave Argabright and Brad Doty. So, guys, welcome to the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. Jacob and I have been at this for almost 2 years now. We're rapidly
Hmm.
approaching 2 years, and I got to tell you, it's extremely intimidating to have two top-notch broadcasters on uh, our amateur podcast. So thank you, Dave Argabright and Brad Doty for joining us today. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks, and my anticipation honestly got me really nervous. But you're here now, and we're excited to talk to you guys. So thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Appreciate you guys having us on.
Yeah, this is kind of new to us too. Dave and I were talking about it. I mean, with all this Zoom stuff and everything that's happened from the pandemic, it's kind of new to all of us too. It's a little different than doing TV. So we're kind of amateurs at it too. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's right. It's odd to be on this side of the interview, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, we're excited to talk to you guys, and we appreciate your time. I want to dive right in with a little bit of history, if that's okay. We brought both of you here because obviously you've known each other for a long time. You work together on the book Still Wide Open, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. But Jacob and I, we've had Brad on the show a few times, which we appreciate you, Brad, for coming on, and
No
we've had a
problem.
chance to talk to you at the tracks. But Dave, we want to find out how you guys met each other. Where did you first cross paths, and where did Dave Argabright and Brad Doty get to know each other?
I don't know, Brad, you may have different memories than me, but my first memories probably are back the Outlaws and the All-Stars, when Brad was starting to race, and I was writing for Speed Sport News some at that time. And I know I met Brad, a couple times just at the races to do a quick interview and that kind of thing. But I really didn't know him well at all. And it wasn't until, in 98, late 98, I decided to go full time with media work and quit my sales job. And I realized that one of the things I needed to do was have more than just, the basic writing. And so I figured, maybe doing a book would be a good idea. And that's when I approached Brad, and we really got to know each other at that point.
Yeah, I knew who Dave was from his writings, Speed Sport and different things, but we didn't really know each other real well. But when we started the book, we got to know each other really well.
Yeah.
We drove over in Indiana and actually, stayed a night or two and slept in our basement, which is a rec room, but doesn't stop. We didn't throw him down in the old dark side of the basement. But from that point on is when we really got to know each other. And then later, of course, worked together a lot in TV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was allowed to stay in the basement only because the barn was full.
That's where we should have put you.
I never knew anybody that had more animals than Brad and Lori. Dogs, horses, you name it.
Yeah.
This is why we brought you on, so we could learn more things about Brad Doty here.
Yeah, well, the animals are my wife, not more so than me. You'll probably hear the dogs barking here before this is over too.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say, both of you have extensive experience in broadcasting. So can you kind of tell us about some of the most memorable racing moments that you guys have gotten to call?
I'll let you go first, Brad. Yeah.
Well, obviously what I remember most, I guess, the first one, Canyon Speedway, back at the Slick 50 days, live TV. I had never done any TV whatsoever. I mean, as a driver, I had been interviewed a few times, and back when the Diamond P and the Hidden Hero stuff, and Steve Evans and Brock Yates were the on-camera guys, and I do remember both of them telling me one time that, when my career ended, I ought to look at going into TV because I seemed comfortable in front of the camera. Well, like Dave said, it's a whole different deal which side of the camera you're on, or how you're, as a driver, when you're being interviewed at the racetrack, in your fire suit, you're kind of in your element. And it's a whole lot different when they're asking you questions. And I was comfortable doing that. But to turn it around and to go in the booth and be live with no training, that was pretty memorable. And then, of course, from a selfish standpoint, the night I got back in the car at Eldora and made the laps with the 18 car, we were live on TNN that night, and was in the booth with Steve Evans. And, of course, it was all pre-planned, but after the B main, they got me down out of the booth. I hopped in my van, slid my fire suit on, got in the car, made those laps, pacing the field. They pushed the car back around, clear around from the pit area back to behind the main grandstands. And we do talk about this in the book. But I got out of the car, got back up in the booth with Steve Evans with 4 laps down to the main, and finished calling the race live on TNN, still wearing my Coors Light fire suit. So that was pretty memorable.
I'm saying, I think we kind of saw a little bit, something that pops into my mind is just from the other night, Clint Boyer on the NASCAR side made his, bigger debut, I guess, in the booth, going full-time from driver to now full-time broadcaster. And I think he mentioned either on the air or even maybe on Twitter that is just so different for him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Dave and I've talked about this too. And people in racing, if they could wear the other hat, whether it's driver, car owner, promoter, sponsor, whatever, if everybody could wear the other's hat for a while and understand, they would understand the sport. And I think we'd be all be better off for it. But yeah, like Boyer said, he's a funny guy, and he's been interviewed a lot as a driver, but to be up in the booth, as he said, it's a whole new deal.
Yeah. I mean, I try to tell everybody, and it's not I say it in a funny way, but it is serious, that it's a lot harder than it looks. I mean, it just is. So.
Yeah. And you guys, I'll admit it. I mean, you guys talked about, getting ready for this interview and stuff. I mean, especially live TV, it's as close to adrenaline rush as I've ever had in a race car. I can do that. When you're going live to the world, it's like I said, the adrenaline starts pumping, and it can be pretty nerve-wracking.
Let's say,
Dave, did you have a most memorable moment in racing that you wanted to throw in there?
I mean, it's hard. It really is hard to distill it down to one or two things, because there's just so many races through the years, and I was never primarily a broadcaster. I always considered myself a writer first and foremost. And when the TV opportunity came around, I always figured that was just kind of icing on the cake, and I had no idea where it would lead or whatever. And now I've coming up on 500 live network broadcasts, and that amazes me, because it sure got here in a hurry, but there's different races that really stand out. I think, Brad, you're right. The first ones really still stick with me. I just remember those first races, particularly the first live races that I did on TNN in the year 2000. And then through the years, different places like the Knoxville Nationals and so forth, it's hard for that not to be memorable, because it's such a great event. When Jason Johnson won it, I distinctly remember that. I remember the year Tim Schaefer won it, because Sammy blew that tire, and we had to interview him moments later, and just stuff like that really stands in your mind. But it is hard to distill it down to one or two.
That was going to be.
That shows the professional that Dave is. He knows exactly how many shows he's done. I have no idea.
I just have a good spreadsheet.
Uh-huh.
I had to put it on a spreadsheet so I know I got paid.
Oh,
You know, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That was going to kind of lead into my next question. I got myself in a little bit of hot water on Twitter last week for saying that Brad Sweet was the best trackside interview in racing, and everybody's like, "What about Thomas Meseraull?" And that's I gotta agree with that, but I was
Yeah.
just talking from a technical, like, here's what happened in that race, and Brad's always on point when you turn the microphone over to him about the last 5 laps, or but Dave, I saw some Twitter comments between you and Joe Swindell last week about an article, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, about an article you did with Kevin, and it made me think about, can you think of those drivers where, or a moment where you might have started to tilt their microphone, you put a question to them, and you started to tilt the microphone at them, and you're like, oh, where is this gonna go? What's about to
Oh
happen?
yeah, that happens a lot, and we always have to keep in mind, it's the heat of the moment. Our sport's a little bit different in that if a basketball player makes a terrible play, or if a quarterback throws an interception and walks to the sidelines, he doesn't have to deal with anybody talking to him until after the game. And our sport can be very different, because a guy can crash or whatever happens, and we have access to that person, fairly quickly. And so I've always, my number one goal is always to be fair. I don't want to be unfair to somebody in that position. And I always ask, before I make eye contact with them, and say, do you want to talk to us? And if somebody says no, or then we don't. Now I'm limited to that. Sometimes I have a producer in my ear, and he's not giving me the opportunity to ask that guy. He's saying, get in there and ask him why he did this. And if you want to keep your job, you have to go do it. It's just that simple. You have to do it. But I try to keep that at a minimum. But every time you kind of go there, especially in the heat of the moment, you really don't know where it's going to go. Luckily, I thought about that. I've been asked that question before, what's the most awkward moment? And there have been really very few, because most of the time racers are savvy enough that they really don't say, inappropriate things, or they really don't. There's very little of that, especially, at a higher level. So luckily, I'm going to knock wood, because I don't want that to happen next week,
Right.
Maybe Lucky Jack Hewitt's not still racing, right?
You damn right I got time for an interview. That's right.
I'm gonna say, so Dave, you've spent some time down south with the Lucas Oil late model guys. So based on what you saw down there, who do you think is going to make some waves with the in the late model world this year?
Well, I think Ricky Thornton Jr., he showed really well as a rookie down there. Looked really, really good. Brandon Overton, he doesn't run any one series, but I think he's going to have a great year. We have to always temper this, because when we go down for speed weeks, we all get all caught up in who's doing well and who's not doing well. But we have to remember, we're only really talking about 2 or 3 different racetracks. And some guys, Jimmy Owens, people like that, they don't particularly shine at East Bay, for example. And once you get out of there and you get back up to the Midwest, it's a completely different season. But I still think we saw enough that, to answer your question, Ricky Thornton Jr., he's on the cusp of I think, a great late model career.
I say I don't follow the late models as much as I do the sprint cars, but going through results, in the mornings, I have definitely seen Ricky Thornton's name a lot, and I remember Brandon Overton just dominated last year in a lot of big races. So it'll be interesting to see how many times their names pop up too. And we also have to remember, not everyone races down in Florida either.
Yeah, exactly right. So, it's fun, and it's an important way to kick the season off, but man, it's a long time before October.
So I know you were covering late models last week, but have you kept up? I'm sure you have kept up with the open wheel stuff. What have you seen over the last week and a half that you're interested to watch unfold?
Well, it is actually hard to stay on top of everything now, because even with, social media and electronic media, you have access to more information. But man, it just feels to me like it's like a fire hose nowadays. There's so many races, so much going on, and with Twitter and everything else, I find it a lot more difficult to just stay on top of things. But obviously, you know, Bobby Allen and Logan and Jacob Allen and everybody, to me, that's still the great story in sprint car racing, because they talk about humble beginnings, man. You know, they're racing on everybody else's takeoffs and stuff. And to see him, you know, be in contention for an Outlaws championship, I gotta confess, I really didn't see that coming. They have, in my opinion, overperformed by a big multiplier. I'm proud of those guys. I mean, they're what racing is really all about.
Yeah, I have to definitely agree with Dave on that. Schuhart's the guy that comes to mind. You know, Dryden came on board a couple years ago and definitely upped their program quite a bit. You know, the old saying in racing, how fast you want to go, how much money can you spend? And money makes you go faster. I don't care, you know, in and they've definitely stepped it up. And Schuhart looks so good in Florida, but he's run good at Volusia the last couple of years. But he's definitely going to be a guy to watch. It's going to be interesting to me with Schatz and the Ford. Looks like Ron Shavers is a little more involved now with the Ford, and it's running good. Of course, you got to watch, you know, Schatz and Sweet. I still think those two guys are going to be the top guys for the championship. But, you know, Schuhart, Gravel in the 2-car now. Sheldon Hodenshield won 5 of his 7 races in the last 20 races of the last season. So he ended up the season really well. And then, of course, Gio Scelzi running the Toyota. That's going to be interesting. The Toyota engine. Aaron Reitzel's going to be running one. So to see Ford involved in sprint car racing and now Toyota getting involved in 410 sprint car racing, I think it's just great for the sport.
I'm going to say, so, unless Clinton was going to say something.
I was just going to say, I think what we've seen, it's a snapshot, but you know, what we've seen between the Outlaws and the All-Stars already is that it's at least the first 3 or 4 weeks when the season kicks off, any given night. I mean, there could be 5, 6 drivers that could end up out front. You know, Sheldon, as you mentioned, he probably could have had a couple of wins in Florida if it weren't for a couple of bad breaks. I think he's found a lot of speed, and can't wait to see them get on a consistent, get on the road, even though we've got a little bit more to go in Florida, I guess. So
yeah, and then you bring up the All-Stars. You know, I mean, my gosh, the talent that they've got running this year, you know, it's going to be an exciting year for them, certainly. You know, with Aaron Reitzel now moving up to the World of Outlaws, it's the championship there with the All-Stars is wide open. There's a lot of good teams that have elected to run with the All-Stars, and it's going to be fun, especially for us, you know, living here in Ohio and in the Midwest. We get to see a lot of those guys at a lot of races.
I'm gonna say I was looking at the schedule the other night, and it's like 35 out of the 55 actual points paying races for the All-Stars are either in Ohio or Pennsylvania. I mean, they probably have, you know, 5 or 7 more that are in Indiana. So I mean, the bulk of the schedule is right there. It's you know, where a lot of these guys are based out of too. So that's I think Ohio, Pennsylvania is definitely where that championship is going to be decided. But you also have to remember you have your local guys like your Cap Henrys or your Buddy Kofoids when they get to race in the 410s, and then obviously the PA Posse too. I mean, that there's going to be probably on any given night, I would say 8 to 10 guys that could win an all-star race.
Yeah, that's a great thing. It's a great thing both for the series and it's great for fans, because the best part of racing is when you really don't know who's going to win the race. You know, that's when it's really interesting.
And you don't know who to cheer for.
Right.
Yeah. Most of the time, I think people don't just cheer for somebody; they cheer against somebody else, or somebody that's they read a quote from that guy, or something he said, or something they heard, and they form this opinion that, well, we don't like him, and then that's, you know, that's just what's made it work for a long, long time, you know.
So, all right, so we're gonna kind of switch gears here to the book Still Wide Open. You know, published in '99, then it became kind of like a hard book to get nowadays. But you guys did a reissue here, I think, over this past winter or summer. You guys worked together on the book. So kind of tell us, you know, a little bit about how that book came together. You mentioned it a little earlier that, you spent some time together and did that, but what are kind of some of those more details, and what goes into writing a book?
Well, I really didn't know when I started because it was the first book that I had ever done. Brad was my guinea pig, so to speak. Um, but it actually worked out well because I couldn't have asked for anybody better to work with while I was kind of finding my way in how you do this. I mean, I had written lots of magazine stories and columns and things like that, but a book is a totally different animal, completely different. And it just takes a lot more effort and discipline and organization and all that stuff. And I was kind of learning on the fly, and so I guess in my mind, I just said, I'll go over to Brad's house and we'll talk, and I'll just make it like a bunch of long interviews. And that's really how it came about.
Yeah, Dave calls me the guinea pig, and I like to tease him that I taught him how to write books.
It's all your fault.
So, yeah. Anybody that's read my stuff in Sprint Car and Midget Magazine knows that I'm kidding, because I'm not a writer. I do a column. Dave's the writer, and he did an excellent job. And like he said, we just talked and of course you can't put everything in the book. You got to weed through things, and there was a lot of proofreading, and Dave was really careful to make it my words. I'd say something or tell him a story, and then he would write it and send it to me, and I'd say, well, I don't use that term, or I don't use that phrase, and he never argued, or never, we changed it, and I'm so proud of the way it came out, and it was really really told the story well, I think.
Yeah, I'm proud of it too. I mean, and with each of my books that I've done, luckily the bonus to all this is I've made some very good friends, along the way. You can't spend that much time with somebody and really get to know them at that level and not become good friends. And so that's been the bonus. But I always felt like, my job was to listen carefully what the person is trying to say and help them say it. And still do that without losing their voice. The best compliment somebody can give me on any of my books is that, hey, when I was reading Brad's book, I could hear him talking. When I read his words, I could hear his voice. That's the best compliment, because that's what I want. That's what you're always after, I think.
So you said it was the first book, and there's many years covered in the book of the stories, but how long did it take? And I'm sure that differs on a book, but how much time did you guys spend together in the editing process, and how long did it take to get the book done?
It was actually one of my most efficient books, to be honest with you, in terms of the time we started and then when we finished, because I think, Brad, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I made the decision to go full time in October of '98. And it wasn't very long after that I reached out to Brad, probably November, maybe December. And I still remember the call, because, I called Brad and said, hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? And he said, who's going to want to read my book? Me? That was his whole position. I said, no, you have a great story, and you have a good story to tell, and people would like to read your story. So we got started probably in January, and I think we had the book in November, as I remember. I know we had it before Chili Bowl, something like that. So.
Well, as Jacob mentioned, it was a very hot commodity there for a while. If you ever looked on eBay for it, like I did for several years, I had to borrow it. And when I did, it was hard to get it out of my friend's clenched hands, as in like, this is coming back to me, right? So, but it's available again. Still wide open is the book with Dave Argabright and Brad Doty. Dave, tell us where we can get the book. Where is it available? Not only that book, but a list of other books that you've written over the last 15 years or so.
Well, my website, I sell, quite a few of my books on my website, daveargabright.com, and all of my books are on there. But also Coastal 181, they're probably the leading book specialist in motorsports books. They have all of my books. And the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and Museum Gift Shop have them as well. So all three of them, they should have everything we've got, they've got.
Okay.
All right, so kind of looking forward here to 2021. What events do you guys have on your docket for the season, and which ones are you most excited about going to or working?
Go ahead, Brad. You go first.
Well, that's obviously a no-brainer for me. It's Ohio Logistics Brad Doty Classic presented by Racing Optics on July 13th, the World of Outlaws event. And we were so lucky last year we got the event in, with the pandemic, and one of the few tracks that were able to run the World of Outlaws in this area. So it turned out really well for us. Just hoping that by when July rolls around, things are opened up even more, and we don't have to worry about that so much as as Dave knows, I worry about the weather, and you guys talk about it in former interviews and stuff. But that obviously that's the one I'm looking forward to. There's going to be a lot of great races, and right behind us are the two Kings Royals paying a lot of money, and hopefully the Knoxville Nationals. We can all get together again, and so I think it's going to be a good season.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody, all of us, we're looking forward to putting last year behind us, and talking about, things like restrictions and all of that. We want to take that out of our vocabulary again. And but for me, I have a pretty busy MAV TV schedule, quite a few Lucas Oil late model races, and also looks like I may be able to do some sprint car races on MAV this year. We'll see. Nice. And then I still enjoy, just as a fan sometimes, going to Kokomo or Eldora or a lot of different racetracks that I enjoy. And but I don't know, Brad, you can chime in on this, but my experience, I've done this for a long time and worked a lot of races, and it's actually reached a point where it's hard for me now sometimes to just go and be a fan. Because when I get there, my wheels are turning, and I'm thinking about, I should be down there arranging interviews, and I should be, what time are we going live? And that kind of thing. And it's a very different experience for me to just go and watch.
Yeah, and I'm not the biggest or the best fan, I guess, put it that way. I was either a driver or up in the booth, or working somewhere or the other. Most of the time I go to the racetrack, but like Dave said, there are times that it is nice to just go and know that I don't have to take notes, I don't have to interview anybody, I don't have to talk to anyone, and you bring up the book. Hopefully things are going to open up enough this summer that my plan is to try to get to a lot more races and bring some books and do some book signings before the race starts, and then just sit back and be a fan and watch the rest of the night.
Yeah, Brad is he's got a habit of he doesn't praise himself very often. He's very humble, and that he really is. That's not an act. He's a very humble person. And but I try to keep telling him all these years that people really liked Brad, and there's reason for it. He's really a genuinely good person. And it's fun to sit with him and do a book signing in a racetrack, because we enjoy it, and you can really see people enjoy it. One great thing about short track racing is that people, racers and media people and promoters, everybody's pretty accessible. We don't have an expensive motorhome we can go hide in. I mean, we're there. And so I enjoy that part. And I know Brad does too. We've had a lot of fun through the years doing book signings. And it's hard to believe sometimes. We wrote that book, 21 years ago. And man, there's no way, but that's what it is,
Boy, we're definitely a lot younger then. A lot of things.
Well, speaking of things changing, that leads directly into the next question. When you consider access to the sport, there's been tons of changes over the last, just in the last 5 years, with pay-per-views, online subscriptions, online pool play like Dirt Draft, the Crown Jewel events getting bigger and bigger. I remember watching this, when it first started on TNN years ago. You mentioned the Slick 50 days. How do you guys feel about the health of dirt track racing over the next 5 years? Where are we going? What are you most excited about? And what's your general feel?
Go ahead, Brad.
Oh, well, it's kind of like David mentioned earlier about, with all the live streaming and everything that's going on, you can almost get overwhelmed at times, you know, trying to keep up with everything and watching, you know, if you watch everything, you watch almost every night of the week, it seems like, you know. So but that's been also good for the sport. You know, I'm as a promoter, you know, mixed on the pay-per-view. You know, you hope that the fans come out to the track. If the weather's bad, they still show up. On the other hand, though, you know, people might see the event from around the world or all, you know, from around the United States that weren't coming anyway, that see it and get it, you know, excited to see the event, think, you know what, I want to go and buy a ticket and be at that event. So that part of it, I think, has been good. By the looks of things, car counts, you know, are up. You know, car owners find the money to go racing, and I think, you know, people are, because of the pandemic, the fans are pent up, you know, have been stuck at home. They're ready to get out. I think once things open up, that we're going to see big car counts and huge, you know, fan counts at some of these races.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall our health is really, really good. Obviously, we just talked about the All-Stars and the World of Outlaws sprint cars. And then over on the late model side, the Lucas Oil Series and World of Outlaws Series, they got plenty of cars there and plenty of good cars. Now, in my opinion, I still think it costs more to race than it should, but we have debated this topic for as long as I've been around, and there are no easy answers on it. So as long as people find the money to go race and they're able to do that, I guess we're okay. I think broadcasting is going to continue to evolve and shift. You know, streaming is here to stay. I do think that we will probably discover that some of the smaller tracks, smaller series, they're going to have a hard time building an audience on streaming, because if you're sitting there in your living room and you're going to spool up a race to watch, are you going to watch the Outlaws, or are you going to watch a sprint car feature at a small, little known racetrack in the middle of nowhere? I mean, they're going to have a hard time, I think, building an audience that can justify the cost of the streaming production. But that'll just take time to shake out as we go along. It just, one thing's for sure, it always changes, and it just keeps changing.
Good deal. Well, guys, I am very thankful that you gave us the time to talk today. It's awesome to have you guys on the show. Like I mentioned, Jacob and I have been at this. I think this is episode 78 in almost
something like
years.
that.
Cool.
Just on a whim. I grew up watching you, Dave. I couldn't believe when I moved to Ohio, I had the chance to actually shake Brad Doty's hand. And so it's an honor to have you guys on the show. And
Thanks for having us.
And thank you guys. Yeah.
And if you're one of the people like me who waited years to get your hands on the book because it was sold out, make sure you go to daveargabright.com and get your copy of Still Wide Open. It's an excellent read if you're a race fan, and make sure you get that in your hands. Jacob,
Appreciate it, guys.
Jacob, you got anything else before we part ways?
I'm going to say I do have one extra thing. I wanted to make sure we got all of our questions in, but I know Brad would appreciate this. From the 2020 Brad Doty Classic, I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to Kyle Larson after the race to get my article done. And I was kind of named off some of the winners of the race, you know, Bobby Allen, Mark Keegan, you know, Donnie. And when I was saying those names to Kyle, he kind of had to do like one of those double takes. He's like, and it kind of hit him that he got to add his name to that list of winners of, you know, the Brad Doty Classic. And I think it meant a lot to him to be able to add his name to that list of such a prestigious race. And then it also, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say that is the one thing, I guess, that I'm so proud of. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stress leading up to it. And when they drop the checkered flag at the end of the night, I mean, it's such a load off my shoulders and everybody involved. But to see the emotion of some of the drivers throughout the years and how, you know, I mean, I'll admit it's not the biggest paying race in the world, but it has grown to the status that drivers do want to win and get their name on the T-shirt, as they say. You know, and I'm really proud of that. And I spent a lot of time with Kyle after the race last year, and actually hauled his son Owen around on my scooter, my electric scooter that I used to go around the pits. And of course, being Kyle's son, we didn't go 5 feet, and he said, "Can I drive?" And the push button for the throttle, and it's electric, and the farther you push the throttle, the faster you go. And of course, you know, I let him take over, and he was wide open. I thought, well, where did you get that? You know, so it's very memorable night last year to, you know, for Kyle to win that race, and yeah, his name will be on the T-shirt this year.
Good deal. We've got I've got one last question, Brad.
It's like we only have about a minute
yeah,
left.
and then we're gone. I promise. Did Don ever get you to shave your beard? And did you get the $100?
Nope, I never shaved, and I never got that.
He's a stubborn dude.
You have to read the book to understand what that means, right?
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we'll get this edited and posted. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, guys. Have a good season.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
All right, bye. Jacob, that was a high point of podcasting for me. I can't remember specifically if this is, we're nearly 80 episodes in, and we've talked to a lot of people. I mean, we talked to Mario Andretti and Kyle Larson and Donnie Schatz. But man, that was an experience.
That was. I mean, it's the amount of experience and the amount of knowledge and just everything these guys can bring to the table when it comes to history and just, like I said, knowledge. And they've seen probably just about everything and just about every facet of short track racing, whether it's on dirt or pavement. I mean, these two are, you know, two of the elites when it comes to race car broadcasting, whether it's short track or, you know, big track, whatever you want to call it. You know, when you think of short track announcing, it's Dave Argabright and Brad Doty. So to get them together at once or at the same time and just to kind of hear some stories and, you know, learn a little bit about them and what they think of racing in the past and now is just, it was a privilege.
Yeah, it was definitely a privilege to have them here on the show. And again, we really appreciate both of those guys taking their time to talk to us. And hope we cross paths again down the road. Go check out the book. It's a great read. You won't regret it. You can get it there on daveargabright.com and pick up your copy. So with that, there's still more racing going on. What are you looking forward to this weekend, Jacob? What do you what's coming down the pike that you're interested in?
We have the USAC guys. We have King of the 360s. We have the Daytona 500. It's going to be a pretty jam-packed weekend, I think. You know, you got Valentine's Day thrown in there too. So I mean, it's going to be hard balancing everything, but well, there will be some time for racing, and you know, I'm excited to, you know, I feel like this is like a huge weekend of racing. You know, our first huge weekend of racing for the year. So I'm excited to get everything kicked off, and I'm looking forward to see what this year is going to bring.
So we were discussing off the air that there's quite a few Ohio drivers in the King of the 360. It looks like. Quite a few names there that you'll be able to watch.
I can't remember everyone, but I know I've seen Danny Smith, Frank Neal, Tyler Gunn. Oh, who am I forgetting? I know I'm forgetting some. Ryan Rule's down there. We've interviewed him before. I know he's technically not from Ohio, but he's raced in Ohio a little bit, and he's a friend of the show. Right. So, you know, obviously we're cheering for those guys, and we're gonna see who comes out of East Bay as the king of the 360s.
Good deal. Well, we it's about 7:20 here on Thursday night as we're wrapping up this episode, so coming in a little late. So this is going to be out on Friday. But as you're watching the USAC qualifying there, who gets the win tonight with the USAC sprint cars?
USAC. I mean, it's going to be hard to go against guys like, you know, Chris Wyndham or Grant, because, you know, they're obviously good at what they do. But I'm excited to see what Buddy can do. I know he was like 5th in practice last night, I think. So for his limited USAC starts in the sprint car, he should be right up front. I don't know if T-Mez is racing tonight. He might have only been a midget thing, or midget racing this past weekend. So I don't know if he's in the sprint car, but if he's in the sprint car, I would expect him to be up front. I just want him to win just so I can hear another interview out of him.
I did not see him on the dirt draft list, but that doesn't mean that he's not actually there.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. Cool. Well, another Thursday night of racing in February, and then another full weekend of it with the Daytona 500 going on this weekend. So enjoy your races as you're watching from home, or if you're in Florida and you're able to make it to the track, and maybe some other racing scattered around South Georgia. But we will be back with another episode of the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. Make sure that you are, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or one of those, make sure you leave us a review. Give us a click there on the stars. We really appreciate that, because that helps us reach a bigger audience, helps others learn more about us. And follow us on Twitter at Ohio Dirt. If you don't do that, you can see it right there, and on Facebook as well. Man, the Facebook followers have been going up. We got to start making sure we give a little more attention to Facebook. So I'll make sure that we're cross-posting everything on Twitter and Facebook. To those of you who have the 85 people who've joined over the last few weeks on Facebook. So welcome to the Ohio Dirt social media. So, all right, Jacob, man, it was a fun day. Thanks for taking the time to get on, not on the phone, but on the video camera here this time.
We're still figuring that out.
All right. Until next time, get out, get dirty, and support your local tracks.